We now are pleased to be joined by Tim Leonard, a WAER alum, of course, and the voice of Syracuse men's lacrosse. Tim, you've called all the games this season. You've seen a lot of ups and downs, some overtime losses, some close wins. I could tell you the ACC tournament last week. It was not necessarily a close win. From your estimation, what happened against Duke?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because everything about the game made you think, oh, this is going to be a fun one. This is going to be a close one. Duke and Syracuse, very similar skill levels this year. Obviously, the first meeting went the way of Syracuse, but you figured Duke would have a counterpunch. They certainly had a counterpunch, maybe a bigger punch than any of us were expecting. I did kind of feel that even though a lot of people were projecting it to be a close game, I thought it was either going to go one of two ways. One way was Syracuse is going to come out and prove that they just have Duke's number, and John O'Dearna has a game plan to slow down this offense, and we were going to see the Duke offense that we saw in the Dome and the Duke offense that we saw the week before against UNC when they were down by 9 goals to an unranked North Carolina team in the regular season finale. The second way, which is how it went, was Duke was going to come out pissed off, and they were after losing to UNC, and also wanted revenge on Syracuse because them scoring 4 goals is unheard of, and they wanted to prove that that was more of a fluke than anything. So once Duke kind of came out with that attitude, and that was a question mark going into the tournament. I think it's a topic around the ACC tournament this year, and it will be next year and the year after that, now that it's back, is how motivated will these teams be that are already in the NCAA tournament to play really hard? Well, Duke didn't play Jake Nasa, their top faceoff guy, at all in the ACC tournament. And I think partially because you just want to get him right for the games that really matter, which is the NCAA tournament. And at first I thought, man, Nasa was the only thing that kind of kept them in the first half. He won all 8 first half faceoffs in the Dome. He's a first team All-American last year. That's good news for Syracuse. But it turned out that they just had no tape on Cal Gerard at all, and he did not take a face-off in the first meeting, and it took them a little bit to figure him out. And once they did figure him out, they were winning the face-offs consistently, but by that point, Syracuse was in too big of a hole, really.
Tim, do you think these slow starts from SU are a problem? We saw them go down 3-0 to UNC, UVA, they went down early, and also they're kind of off of long rest periods. NCAA tournament isn't going to be as long as a rest as the ACC tournament was, but do you still think that's a worrying sign for this team that they kind of just start games a little sluggishly?
No, I would say more the worry for me would be like, how are they playing in the fourth quarter and how well is their execution if they're leading in the fourth quarter? When you talk about the game against Towson this weekend, I think that's more of my worry. Now, every team gets off to some slow starts here or there. You mentioned the UNC game. That was also off of 14 days rest, like you said. I think you could make a case for that. The UNC game was kind of an interesting situation where the team had to get up really early the night before. They flew down. There was a long layover. It just wasn't an ideal travel situation. And mixed with the fact that they didn't have Pat March as their offensive coordinator and just some wonkiness to that game that overall, I mean, yeah, they got off to a slow start, but then they were up and in control of the game by halftime. So I think that one was they kind of just had a unique situation all around. You could also point to like the Cornell game. They get off to the best start ever and they still don't win the game. So to me, there hasn't been a ton of trends in terms of poor starts. If anything, the trend has been if they're leading in the fourth quarter, is this team going to do the smart things? Are they going to turn it over? Are they going to clear properly? Are they going to take the right shots? And are they going to put away a good team in the fourth quarter? And some of that, we can talk about it. I think that comes down to how well can they play when they're playing maybe a little bit slowed down version of their offense, which to me, their offensive style, when it is humming, is very quick. And you guys have watched it. It's perimeter ball movement. It's all 6 guys getting a touch and, quick sticks, stick skills are used. And I think sometimes when they get up by 3 or 4 goals, like the Hopkins game or the Carolina game, then they kind of get into what is maybe too much of a stall ball sort of offense and they slow it down. And then boom, there's 20 seconds on the shot clock. And who do you turn to? Because they do have a great offense, but the offense isn't really predicated on individual guys beating you one-on-one or dodging with quickness. Owen Hiltz is a terrific player. He's not really that guy that's going to shake his defender down late in the shot clock. Joey Spallina, we all know he's an outstanding player. He's incredibly cerebral. He's a great passer, probably one of the best passers in the nation. He's a great shooter too, but his skill is not breaking you down late in the shot clock as a Dodger. He's not that type of player. So sometimes when you watch their offense in the fourth quarter, I think there is a little bit of a just slow down effect that makes them get out of the flow of what they normally do. So in terms of my concerns, I think still the fourth quarter, I think they have gotten a lot better. And the Virginia game was an example of them sort of switching it up. They put Michael Leo to attack late in that game. They make the right adjustments and they make the winning plays. So I think they're feeling more confident about their fourth quarter execution, and they've had a lot of opportunity to get better, which is great going into some of the biggest games of the year here. But in general, that is probably the bigger concern as opposed to a slow start. Now, the pressure is going to be on Sunday night. They're coming off probably their worst game of the season. So we'll see what happens. If they get off to a slow start, though, I think this team has proven that they can score in bunches and come back in a game as well.
That Johns Hopkins game is very interesting because they had the 4-goal lead. Like you mentioned, I was down on the field and they were, just holding and holding it. I feel like that always just takes the energy out of a team's sails when they're up by 4 or 5. It's like you want to burn clock, especially with the long shot clock, but you also kind of want to, keep the foot on the gas pedal. You mentioned getting into, the humming mode for Syracuse's offense. It really wasn't allowed to do that in the first quarter, considering they didn't have an offensive possession and for the first 6 minutes. And that brings up Will Mark, obviously probably his worst game as a collegiate goalie. What do you think happened with Will Mark, and do you see him kind of rebounding against Towson on Sunday?
I do see him rebounding, and I know that's like the easy answer and the answer everyone's expecting me to say, but Will Mark has not done anything like that in his career. And frankly, what he does to get ready for a game from a mental standpoint, there was a good article recently, I think it was the Daily Orange, talking about like his meditation before a game. Like the guy does everything possible to be ready to go. And I just think he's going to come out and play probably one of his best games of the season, knowing his makeup and what he's about and what he puts into his craft, basically. And that's what all good goalies have to do. And also, I do think, yes, Will Mark was off. There's no denying that in the first quarter. But frankly, every goalie probably would have been off against the way that Duke came out and how much Duke had possession in the first quarter, and the fact that they were getting a lot of open looks. They got a couple man-up goals. Josh Sawada hit one from 10 yards out straight away, no one in sight, off stick side. That's just a tough save to make for Will Mark. Were there a couple that he'd want back? For sure. But I think that's going to happen more so than other sports. I mean, you look at like Matt Nunes for Virginia has been pulled in a couple games, and he probably should have been pulled in the game against Syracuse and then came back and ended up having a terrific game and had 15 saves. So Mark, it's so rare because he is that good of a goalie. And I mean, I was appalled at the end of the first quarter to see him come out of the game. That's when I was like, man, this is like, this is nightmare scenario stuff for Syracuse. But it was kind of cool to see Jimmy McCool, who I thought did well. And from everything I've heard in practice, that guy's ready to take over next year and will be a top flight goalie. And the Orange, it's tough to replace Will Mark, but in a way, they are in very good hands for the future. But I expect Will Mark to bounce back just because, I mean, he got off to a slower start to this year, and then he did the right things to make sure that he made some corrections and was playing like the best goalie, if not the best, the second best in the nation. So it was probably just, an off quarter there for him and a tough situation given what the shots he was seeing and the team he was facing and all that. So, I mean, his career against Duke has been amazing before that game. He was stopping like 75-78% of their shots, and maybe water kind of found its level, but I wouldn't be too worried at all about Will Mark bouncing back.
I remember the last game of last year's regular season at Duke, and half the reason Syracuse ended up, I think, losing by 3 is because Will Mark was just on fire.
Yeah, those
Um,
22 saves in the dome game last year. I mean,
yeah,
for whatever reason, he's just loved Duke, and maybe they made a change. I mean, I didn't notice anything drastically different. I did notice that all their shots looked really good. Like McAdory was stinging corners, and that was the change they made, I guess. Not
They
directly
made
about how they're
McAdory
shooting at
down to
Will Mark,
attack.
but yeah, moving him to attack. I think we all kind of wondered, all right, Duke's going to make a change here because the first game went so poorly against Syracuse. They're coming off a terrible loss to UNC. And, it was pretty much a genius change. I don't think it was something that Kyle and I called for in the last game. Like they kind of lack a dodger on their attack line. So Wada, I guess you could say, is that guy. But when Figueres was locking them up in the first game, it just felt like it was like someone shaking, then throwing, and then one-on-one offense. Just not a lot of good ball movement. And I think putting McAdory behind the goal, attacking from X. At first, the Orange had Caden Cole on him, and that didn't work. So then they had to rotate Sam Alexo and bring him down. And Alexo has guarded him really well in previous games, but McAdory was just kind of already in a group by that point. So that was a good change by them.
Yeah, you mentioned the nightmare scenario of taking out Will Mark and obviously Cal Gerard playing for Duke. So, was it the performance? You get Will Mark a rest, maybe get Jimmy McCool some experience in the ACC tournament. You mentioned that the games don't, technically matter. Given that, do you think that it's better to have the ACC tournament or to have those two games be in the regular season? And then on that point, since when they're in the regular season, they're at like a home site or whatever. Do you think the tournament should be at a one of the conference home sites like the Big Ten does it?
Man, I feel like I'm a coach. I'm sure they're sick of getting asked these questions, but it does seem like all the ACC coaches don't really love the ACC tournament. I will say Gary, from my interaction with him, I think he's kind of for it. He wants to play for a title at the end of the year, and he might be in the minority compared to other ACC coaches. I know uh John Danowski, I mean, they certainly played like they wanted to be there, but the history of his comments don't really lend you to think that he wants it. I would say this. I do think the ACC tournament should have, I mean, in a perfect world, there's 6 teams and there's an automatic qualifier. And I think that's the answer, whether it's Delaware, whoever you have to add to get that 6 team, that would be the best scenario for me. But that hasn't happened yet, and it feels like it's not going to happen because of a lot of different reasons. So if it is 5 teams and you don't necessarily have to have the tournament, my one request would be just play it at a campus site, I would say. And unfortunately, I think it's booked in Charlotte until 2028, I believe is. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely booked there for the next couple of years, and I don't think that's going to change. I get the intrigue there. They're trying to make Charlotte into a lax city, and I think it is a nice venue, and it's right near. You can see the skyline. Like, there's a lot of cool things about the venue, but unfortunately, the crowd size is just not going to be nearly as good if it's at a campus site. Like, the fact that Syracuse has not hosted an ACC tournament, it's just kind of a bummer. And it just worked out that they were kind of up, and then it was COVID, then the tournament was canceled. But when you do play at these campus sites, whether it's UNC, Duke, Virginia, Notre Dame, you're going to draw good crowds. Now, obviously, the home team is going to have an advantage, but I think that's fine. A lot of other conferences just give the 1 seed the host site. You could do it that way as well if you don't want to just rotate. But to me, Syracuse or the Dome hosting an ACC tournament would be a really cool thing. Now, the Dome also is always kind of juggling 5 or 6 things, and you got to get something on the schedule a long time in advance. So the idea of them just, they're the number 1 seed, we got to go to the Dome now and get ready for 3 lacrosse games it feels kind of hard to do. But I think it's good. If anything just helps your RPI. It didn't really hurt Syracuse that much. It's more games. But I think the constant thing that a lot of the coaches bring up is, well, we can kind of do that. We did have 6 regular season games, and then we get one more big home game where we're drawing a lot of, a good crowd and some money comes in and all that. So, yeah, I think in a way it's kind of like, why are we going to a neutral site where not a lot of fans are going to be there if we could just go to a better site from a fan standpoint? But you could also say it's spreading the game, and there are probably a handful of people that didn't even really know much about ACC lacrosse that were there and all that, and now maybe they're going to watch the NCAA tournament, and there's some trickle down effect from that. I also would say just play it like every other tournament Thursday, Saturday. I think that's a TV thing, but Sunday feels a little bit too close to the NCAA tournament, and that's the concern, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think having the ACC tournament at the Dome would be really cool because look at that Virginia game and how many people came for that. But if you got Monster Jam in the Dome, maybe you can't
Yeah,
fit an
right.
ACC tournament. So we can't talk about Syracuse men's lacrosse without talking about Joey Spallina. I think he had a great season, but I feel like it was quiet. He didn't get the recognition he deserved. How do you rate his second year with Syracuse? Was it quiet on your end, or do you think it was just a really good season, but he just didn't get that recognition because people already knew how good he was?
Yeah, I don't know why he doesn't get more recognition. It seems to me, I mean, it's a 22 thing, I guess, that the standards are really high. It's odd. When I talk to people that don't really follow lacrosse, they're like, "Hasn't that 22 been kind of a bust?" I'm like, "No." Like he's if anything, he's been really good or exceeded expectations. And I'm not just saying that as some guy that covers the team and wants to support the guys. Like his stats are great. And yes, does his stats dip a little bit when he goes against tougher competition? Definitely. But doesn't Brennan O'Neill's, doesn't Connor Schellenberger. I mean, all these guys have off games. Like the expectations are just too high on Joey, and he's a sophomore, and I'm comparing him to the best players in the country who are all seniors and 22, 23 years old, grad students, whatever they are. So I don't really know why. I mean, Syracuse plays the toughest schedule of anyone, and he's putting up about as many points per game as anyone in the nation. I mean, last I looked, he's top five or top 10 at least. He was averaging about 5.1 going into the ACC tournament. He scored 4 on 4 goals against Kenny Brower, one of the best defenders in the nation. So, I mean, he's right around 5 points per game at this point, going into the postseason of his second year. And he's a tremendous passer. And the other thing is, a lot of times, like the Virginia game, he didn't score a point. First off, that's the first time that's ever happened in his career. But also, Syracuse scored 18 goals, and he was doing stuff to help them in that game. If anything, he's just being used as a decoy boy, and they understood how they were kind of handling the matchups. And Syracuse recognized, all right, this two-man game with English and Thompson, they're not handling this well. Their off-ball defense is struggling. Let's go to that. We're not, maybe another game against Virginia, they'd handle that better and they'd utilize Joey more. So the Orange offense is very much 6 guys compared to other, and even you count the second midfield line, then you're looking at 9 guys. They're more of a balanced unit than any other team in the country. And that's why I think sometimes there are games where it feels like Joey Spallina isn't getting touches as much as he should be. But naturally, when you have such a balanced offense, a couple guys are not going to be as much of a part of the offense as normal. Whether that's Michael Leo, Owen Hiltz, like all these guys, if they played for another school, would be the focal point of the offense. But at Syracuse, they're just kind of another key cog in the offense. And Spallina, to me, through 2 years, what he's done statistically, what he's done as a leader of the team, as a young guy, he's checked every box off the field. And I just think he's loved by all his teammates. And overall, it's been a terrific year this year and a terrific start to his career. Is he going to be like a Tewaaraton winner as a senior? Like the question I think then becomes, what's his ceiling as a player? Because he's not your typical number 1 overall recruit. He's not a really athletic guy, but I will say his behind the back goal that's become kind of his signature goal is, I mean, at least he's got that. He's got like a signature shot that we're going to remember. And that thing's as cool to watch as any shot in the sport right now, and unbelievably tough to stop. So overall, I think he's been great. I would give him like an A for this season. And obviously he would tell you that, what he does in the postseason now is what really matters. And I think he's ready for that challenge. And this is probably going to be the first of a lot of postseason games for Joey Spallina, which is the exciting thing.
Yeah, and one more thing with Spallina. Do you think it's a weird, like almost weird or worrying when he doesn't score a lot? Because prior to that Duke game, he wasn't really scoring as much. It was more of him getting the assists. Is that better for Syracuse's offense when he's behind X and getting those assists? Or do you think it's better for Syracuse if he's the one scoring the goals?
Yeah, I think it again comes down to just how is the defense playing Syracuse. So the UNC game against our old pal Dave Petramala, they were going to let Joey get hung up essentially at X there. And remember, he was just picking cutters, and he had 5 assists in that game. I think he scored 1 goal, so he had 6 points. Now, the case for why he wasn't on the All ACC team is because he didn't score a ton of points. I believe it was 9 points before the tournament in the 4 regular season ACC games. Didn't score a point against Virginia. So if you look at just his body of work in the tournament, maybe you could, in the ACC season, maybe you can make a case that, that's fine to leave him off the team. I would argue if you're going to go off of just ACC, which we should probably clarify it, because I don't know if there's really a ton of precedent on what they're looking at more than the other. Like Owen Duffy wins Rookie of the Year. He didn't play in 2 ACC games. I probably would have said Light, the defender for Notre Dame, should have won ACC Rookie of the Year. He guarded the top guy in all 4 games. Notre Dame won all 4 games, and he was outstanding. I mean, I think if anything, he's underrated. You could say the faceoff guy for UNC, Brady Wambach, was in all the games and was right up there nationally in faceoff win percentage. But then you get into, well, he's a faceoff guy, and everyone kind of looks at the numbers for attack before anything, or the offensive players are going to get more love. So I would argue, though, if you're going to just do, all right, the all ACC teams are how you play an ACC play, why don't we just wait till after the ACC tournament? Because if you're Duke, you got 2 more games. Like, that's a pretty big sample size add from 4 to 6 games, and everyone pretty much got at least 1 more game. So it just depends on how defenses play him. But overall, I think Salinas had a great start to his career here.
Zooming out to the team as a whole, 3rd season under Gary Gait, 4 wins first year, 8 wins second year, now into the NCAA tournament for the first time. How do you look at it in terms of where Gary is at as a head coach? I know he said earlier in the year to John Wildhack they're not back until their championship weekend. It's the first NCAA tournament berth. And how much do you think, grading, quote unquote, if you want to call it that, evaluating how Gary's doing as a head coach relies on, winning against Towson or winning NCAA tournament games this season specifically?
Yeah, it's a big game, right? I mean, the season's probably considered a failure if you lose this game. The season's probably considered a success. Like, it's as simple as that. I don't, not to put more pressure on the game than needs to be. I think all the guys understand that. They understand, if you're a Syracuse, that if you go out there and you play your game, you're going to get the win, especially at home. You're a better team than Towson, but Towson's really good. And 4 seeds have lost before. Last year, Maryland lost to Army as a 4 seed in the first round. So I'm expecting a close game, and I'm expecting the Orange to be in a tight situation or 2 over the course of the game. And I think overall, Gary has done a really nice job. The cupboard was extremely bare. The 4-10 season, it almost is kind of a bummer that he had to handle that, because it just makes his win-loss record and everything look worse than it really is. Last year, they just couldn't win a face-off, so they solved that issue. But in general, they showed a ton of strides last year. They just didn't have the ball. And, lacrosse sometimes just boils down to that. Like, we saw it in the first quarter against Duke. When you don't touch the ball, you're not going to score, and you're not going to be in the game. And they have figured that out. I think going forward, the future is extremely bright. I also think the hiring of John O'Dearna is one of the best things that's happened to this program. And, Gary made that hire, and you could say, well, Dave Petramala left, and, in a way that may end up being a good thing for Syracuse. It's hard to say, but I think that they have John O'Dearna. I just think he's an incredible lacrosse mind. All the players rave about him. They love playing for him. They love his style. It's a unique style. The stuff he's doing, whether it's the man down defense, I mean, you sit down and talk to the guy, and to me, he is a head coach that is our defensive coordinator, Syracuse's defensive coordinator. And that's a huge luxury to have. He's one of the best assistant coaches in the nation, no doubt. And if they were giving out, Gary, to me, should have won ACC Coach of the Year. If they were giving out ACC Assistant of the Year, John O'Dearna should have swept that for sure. And Pat March is a great assistant and a great offensive mind as well. So I think they're in a very good spot. The thing with Syracuse is there's a lot more pressure on Syracuse than it's like the Yankees of baseball, or whatever analogy you want to make. It's like Texas football. Like The conversation is, are they back? And everyone on the Texas football team knows that. So once they get into the fourth quarter of a big game, it means more to them than it means to Rice or Texas A&M, or I guess Texas A&M has a lot of pressure on them too, but you get the point. So, and especially in lacrosse, it's like Syracuse's fan base makes up a large chunk of the overall lacrosse fan base, and it's growing. And I'm not taking away from what lacrosse is, because all these teams want to win and all these teams feel pressure, but not all of them play in front of the amount of fans at the Dome, and not all of them are getting interviewed throughout the week as much as the Syracuse guys. And I think, long story short here, this is a big step for the program, because if they can make a run, if they can get back to championship weekend, then you're talking about the ceiling is the limit. Now, they don't even have to win the national title this year. If they lose in championship weekend, I think just getting back there, at least the question is not being asked at the preseason media availability next year. When are you guys going to get back to championship weekend? And we can put that aside. And then you're talking about probably a preseason number 1, number 2 team in the nation coming off a trip to the Final Four. So there's no denying these next couple of weeks are huge for the program. And frankly, it's hard to grade Gary on how his season's gone, or how his first 3 years have gone, because this is such a big game. But I think everyone knows that. And all the guys have been putting in so much work this year. It's been a connected team that it gives me faith that this first game, they'll go out there, they'll execute. And then from there, maybe they can start kind of running downhill and get some confidence under them.
So yeah, speaking of that NCAA tournament, what do you think about where Syracuse was seated? You know, they were seated below Johns Hopkins, but given that they beat Johns Hopkins earlier in the season, were you surprised by that?
Maybe a little bit. Yeah, I probably would have had them as the 3 seed. So much of that kind of comes down to what are the matchups that they're trying to get, and bus trips versus plane trips and stuff like that. I will say, I think maybe part of it was they did not want to pair Syracuse against Virginia in the quarterfinals and wanted to avoid ACC on ACC. So whether the 3 or the 4 makes a little bit of a difference. I mean, now you're looking at Notre Dame probably in the first game of championship weekend if you do get there. To me, Denver and Michigan on the other side is kind of interesting, not to look past Towson, because, you know, I'm sure you guys are going to ask me about them. And my takeaway from digging into Towson is this is going to be a close game, and this is going to be a game that Syracuse definitely could lose. Obviously, they have some history of beating Syracuse going back to 2017 in the tournament as well. I think that Denver-Michigan draw, if anything, is favorable. I will say Michigan is one of those teams that is playing really well right now, and I almost expect them to win on the road at Denver. And if they win, and they're coming off, 3 huge wins in a row, Hopkins, Maryland, Denver on the road, and they're looking good, that sometimes that's what happens in this playoff format. And it's true for all sports, but especially in lacrosse, if you get a team that is playing well at the right time of the year, some wonky stuff can happen here in the tournament. And Michigan, it should be noted, is a team that Syracuse has played in a scrimmage each of the last 2 years. And this year it did not go well. I mean, I think everyone kind of knows what happened there. I'm not speaking out of school here. It was an eye-opening, punch in the face to Syracuse before the season. Michigan came out with a 10-man ride in a scrimmage, which is a little intense. And Syracuse wasn't really ready for it, and it woke them up, and I think allowed them to start out the season better than maybe they would have. It was a good thing for them, but it's like going back to the conversation you have about Duke, or the Duke-Virginia series. There's a lot of these moments or series in lacrosse where you wonder, does this team just have the other team's number? And I think that would be a storyline if they do play Michigan in the second round. The other thing is Michigan will be coming from Denver, flying back to Towson, and it's like, a football team going west to east, the Chargers playing the Steelers or whatever it is. And that conversation a little bit, I think they might be a little bit more worn down, or whoever Syracuse plays, if they do win the first game, will be worn down. So the seeding, I think they should have been the 3 seed, but the 4 seed might actually be the better draw, because you don't have to play a team in Virginia that you've kind of played already, and they know their scouting report on them, and it's almost like the familiarity aspect might have been a disadvantage to Syracuse.
Yeah, I've been fascinated by the seeding arrangements. Obviously, Michigan made the run. They were going to get Denver probably no matter what, just given on the flights part of that.
Yeah.
Um, and then I was listening to the Brent's podcast and talking to Anish and like the fact that 4 ACC teams theoretically could be in championship weekend, given that not one of them play each other in the quarterfinals. And I do think that Syracuse should have been the three. If you look at, top 5 wins, and, the only thing Syracuse really loses is total top 20 wins and RPI, but they have 3 top 5 and Johns Hopkins has 1. But if you look at it, I agree. I think the 4 seed actually sets them up better. The Michigan run last year was interesting too, because they did the Big Ten tournament. They won that.
Yeah.
They got to the quarterfinals and then lost. So that's where their streak ended last year. So if Michigan gets to the quarterfinals, could they get over the hump then? You mentioned the scrimmage, so there's definitely familiarity. Starting with the path for Syracuse, they have to get through Towson. Towson, technically, I guess if you want to say they're the number one defense in the country based on goals allowed per game.
Yeah.
Obviously, not the hardest schedule in the country coming from the CAA. They have 2 really good defenders. I know one of the names off the top of my head, Colby Bars.
Mhm.
And they have a really good defense. So kind of what's the what does Syracuse have to do to kind of beat Towson at home on Sunday? And then you mentioned that the matchup Denver Michigan. Who do you think would be better for Syracuse to go up against in that quarterfinal game?
So this is going to sound. I'll answer the second question first, and then I'll get into Towson. I think Denver actually is probably better, and I don't know if that's me putting too much weight on the scrimmage, but I just think Denver, if anything, has been. Maybe I'll be eating my words here, but I just think they've been, if anything, overrated this year. I candidly have not watched them as much as even Michigan or other teams, so I'll be hand up on that. Like I don't know Denver's roster up and down, but I just think Michigan, given the scrimmage, and also if Michigan were to go and beat Denver, they are really playing hot at that point, and they're not playing like an unseeded team. I don't care what the seed says. I just think Denver is probably a team trending down, and Michigan is a team trending up. And then you're talking about, okay, Michigan will be really trending up and going into Towson to play Syracuse maybe, and whoever it is in the quarterfinal, and probably feeling very good about their chances. As far as Towson, they are the number one statistical defense in the nation. Statistically, they're great in like every stat because they don't play that tough of a schedule. We have seen them play against some good teams. Virginia beat them 19-15. That score is a little misleading. It was actually kind of more of a blowout than anything. Hopkins, they played all right in the first game of the season. I believe that was 13-5, if memory serves. So, they played Hopkins, they played Virginia. Syracuse played Delaware this year, and I think Delaware is a good team. I mean, yeah, they're not as deep as Syracuse and they're not as talented, but watching Delaware and coming away from that game, I thought, man, they could beat someone in the tournament. And heck, they almost beat Duke in the first round last year. So, Towson played Delaware a couple times and beat them up. I mean, especially this last time around. So Towson's won 9 in a row. The expectations on them are not nearly as high. The pressure on them is not nearly as high. So if you're making a case for Towson to win this game, you don't have to go too far here. I mean, they're going to be the more free team, you'd have to imagine, during the opening whistle. And I do think faceoffs, I sound like a broken record probably, but that's going to be a huge factor in this game. And Towson's got a great faceoff guy. How well will Syracuse come out? Because, if they lose the opening, what was it, 6 faceoffs against Duke, I think they lost 8 of the first 9. I'm not saying that's going to happen again, but if that happens, you're staring a deficit right in the face, and then panic might set in. And I don't care how much better Syracuse is or how much more talented they are. If they're not winning the faceoffs, they might be in for a loss here. So faceoffs will be important. Goalie play will be important. Syracuse is the better team, don't get me wrong, but I do think Towson is going to be playing with less pressure, and it would not shock me if we're going down the stretch here and it is a very tight game in the fourth quarter.
So jumping over to women's lacrosse, Syracuse also in tournament play. They're either going to play Stony Brook or Niagara. Kayla Trainer's group's kind of similar to the men's side, where tournament play, postseason play, big games have kind of been a little bit of Achilles heel. They can't seem to get over the hump. Do you think this year's team, regardless of who they're going to play, either Stony Brook, who they did lose to earlier in the year, or Niagara, this is finally the year that this group can get over the hump and get that national title?
I think it's kind of funny that it is Stony Brook in that first game, because to me, that was the turning point of their season. I think the players have spoken about that too. That was like, all right, we got to have a kumbaya meeting, if to quote Dino Babers, after that one, and try and figure some things out. And I do think from that game on, they've been locked in, and they played like, if not the best team in the nation, probably right behind BC or Northwestern. So they're probably going to have to go through BC. I expect them to beat Stony Brook. And the question is then going to become, what adjustments can you make against BC? Can you solve that puzzle? And it's a similar thing. It's like Syracuse getting to championship weekend on the men's side. Can they get over that mental hurdle? Can Syracuse women's team beat BC and get over that mental hurdle? They're definitely good enough, obviously, to beat BC. I think they're, if anything, a better team than BC this year. And they got off to such a great start in the ACC championship game, but then it fizzled. And, we'll see. I think we are going to get a rematch of that game. I feel pretty confident that they will take care of Stony Brook. And they are really pretty similar to the men's team in the sense that they don't have that true number one star player on offense. But I love the way they move the ball. I love that pretty much anyone can have a big game for them. They're very balanced. Their defense is, if anything, underrated, and I think that's been a huge improvement over the course of the season. They've changed some things to their defense, and they are playing very well on the defensive end. Delaney Schweitzer has gotten better in net as the season has progressed. So I like their chances of making it to championship weekend, probably seeing a rematch against BC there. And man, I mean, they got to beat BC at some point. Like, they're not going to go over against BC. I keep saying maybe this is the game. So I think that's going to be high drama and a lot of pressure. And, BC is going to think that they have Syracuse's number. It's, again, in lacrosse, more than other sports, it feels like one team can kind of own the other team. And it becomes a mental thing. But to me, Syracuse is just as good as Northwestern, just as good as BC. When they're playing good, they can win the national title. And they're in kind of a similar position to the men's lacrosse team. It's just, they got a little bit of a mental hurdle to get over in the process. And if they get over that, I like their chances.
When I was looking at the women's bracket when they announced it, I was kind of shocked that Stony Brook was even in Syracuse's region. And I know that, in lacrosse, they take it into account driving, flights, and all of that. But Stony Brook, 17-2, like top 15 in the country, being matched up with well, and they still have to beat Niagara, to be fair.
Yeah.
But assuming they beat Niagara, like that's a tough. I think that's a tougher matchup for Syracuse probably than the quarterfinal. I mean, if you look at Syracuse women's lacrosse, they can beat anybody in the country pretty much, except for BC that we've seen, for the most part of the year. You mentioned the Stony Brook game as the turning point. They won 9 straight after that game and then lost to BC at the end of the regular season. So it'll be interesting to see if Syracuse women's lacrosse can get back to the Final Four. Before we let you go, Tim, I got one quick question for you. I don't remember what the lacrosse teams were like when you were, a junior and senior at Syracuse, but do you have any favorite May lacrosse memories, whether it be women's lacrosse or men's lacrosse back from your time at WAER or WJPZ?
Yeah. So my freshman year was 2017 when they lost to Towson. So hopefully we don't get a repeat of that. That was in the quarterfinals.
Were you on the call for that game?
No, that was
No.
my freshman year.
Oh, your freshman year, sorry.
Yeah. No, freshman year, 2017, they were really good that year. Number 2 seed. Towson made it to the Final Four, of course, because they won the quarterfinal game. They just got up 6-0 in the first quarter and didn't really look back in that game. 2018, they lost to Cornell at home in the first round. Don't really remember a ton about that game. All I remember about the Syracuse Cornell matchups from my time as a student at WAER was Jeff Teat was a problem in those games. And Jeff Teat is, of course, one of the best players in Cornell history. 2019, I did call that game when I was a junior. It was against Pat Spencer and Loyola in the first round.
Oh, wow.
And Chase Scanlon was on the other side as well. He was a freshman before he was Chase Scanlon at Syracuse, and we don't have to talk about that too much. Wasn't the best 22 ever, but Loyola was a game that Syracuse probably should have won. I think it was 15-13 was the final score of that game, and it just felt like a team that understood the magnitude of trying to get over the hump in the tournament and, was feeling the weight and the pressure of Syracuse lacrosse and everyone asking why is Syracuse lacrosse struggling in the tournament. So that was the final game I called as a student lacrosse wise, and Pat Spencer went off and it was a great game. It was at Loyola. A lot of fun to do it, but unfortunately they didn't really produce a ton of May memories over the course of my 4 years there. 2020, my senior year, as you guys know, you're not really
Yeah.
locked into lacrosse as much because the way it works at the student station WAER, you kind of phase into the juniors start to become seniors and they are the head of the lacrosse class and basically doing all the lacrosse games. The one memory I have about 2020 lacrosse was that was a team that actually was #1 in the nation and really felt like they could get back to being, a Final Four national championship type of team. And I do remember when COVID happened, I was down at the ACC tournament for basketball as a senior covering that, and that's when all hell broke loose basically, and everything went sideways. And Syracuse did have a game, I want to say against Rutgers, that was scheduled in men's lacrosse. No, maybe it was Duke, actually. I think it was Duke. It was on the schedule like 2 weeks away. And this is like right when COVID happens. And I was talking to Corey Spector, who was the WAER sports director of the junior class. I'm a senior. So he's kind of like the new sports director, and he's trying to figure out the lacrosse schedule. And I stayed down in North Carolina because that's where the ACC tournament was. That's where my home was. And COVID pushed us from Greensboro to where I live in Cary, which is pretty close to Durham. And Syracuse was supposed to play Duke. And I remember talking to Corey, and he's like, can you and your pal Jonathan Hoppy, who's also in North Carolina, do that Duke game if it comes to it? Because it's very rare. You would never have a senior do a game.
Yeah.
But travel-wise, it would have just limited exposure and everything. It's kind of silly to think about now because they were never playing those games, and obviously shut us down for a really long time. But that's just how quickly it all happened. We went from, all right, we got to go home. Like, is the lacrosse season happening? Is it not? Or, all right, we got to plan for these games. And then like an hour after our phone call, probably the lacrosse season was canceled and, everything was shut down essentially. And it was a foolish conversation. But yeah, no, not a ton of May memories, but maybe that's going to change now. Now that I'm ready for some May memories this year. I do think this team has all the potential to make a run to the national championship game, to Memorial Day weekend. They've been involved in so many close games this year. We're probably going to get some more close games. And I think the way that they scheduled has set them up to succeed in these close moments. And it should not go overlooked on the women's side and on the men's side, just how tough Gary and Kayla schedule. And they do it for this reason, because they know this is when it really matters, and you got to get as many reps before the playoffs as possible.
If it's any consolation, I guess you ended up calling future Golden State Warrior Pat Spencer
Yes,
for
right.
for Loyola
Exactly.
Maryland lacrosse. But
He's
thanks
the
again
best player I've ever seen, I think, in terms of calling a game. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, you get into like Lyle Thompson but Pat Spencer. It's kind of amazing to think like he's good at I mean, obviously he's great at basketball. He's an NBA basketball player. It boggles my mind that you can be that good at lacrosse, and fairly cool.
Hey, maybe that's Cole Kastner.
Yeah, right. He's ready to play. I think he got drafted too, PLL, but
Yeah,
I guess
so.
he's got Stanford on his mind. I think it's Stanford, right? It's where he's
Yeah,
going
Stanford men's basketball. So we'll see him next year potentially in the
You're
ACC
right. I didn't even think of that.
ACC
Wow.
men's. It'll be very interesting. ACC men's lacrosse players turn to basketball players is a good history now for on Cole Kastner's side. Thanks again for taking the time, Tim, to talk with us.
Yeah, always enjoy it, guys, and hopefully we get to chat maybe down the road as they make a run in the tournament.